I know I've been promising the Book of Ruth for a couple of months now. I think I even might have listed it last year at one point in time, but it has never come to fruition until now. This is one of my favorite books, Ruth and Esther. The Gospels are great. I love the Gospels because they tell us of Jesus Christ, but I'll tell you what, when I'm reading the Old Testament, I'm constantly looking for what it is that God has done for us and can continue to do for us, and who Jesus is. And in the Book of Ruth, we see Jesus. I found this introduction to the Book of Ruth in my Wesley Study Bible. I received the Bible when I was ordained, and I don't typically pick it up because it's not NIV version, and I like the NIV because I feel it's a little bit more readable and understandable. But for some reason, God nudged me to go over to my shelf and pull out my Wesley Study Bible. And it tells us about the Book of Ruth. The Book of Ruth exhibits a vision of an ideal society. This beautifully crafted little story concentrates on the fortunes of a family within a small agrarian community. The dialogue is concise and dramatic. Key terms are repeated throughout, and there are numerous word plays. Yet, its concern is radical, for at its center are two women making deep commitments to each other. As childless widows in foreign lands, they represent the poorest of the poor. A primary theme is faithful living with one another, showing the same loyal compassion that God has for humankind. In this type of community, the marginalized are included, the elderly are cared for, and the children are valued. The story ultimately provides a vision of redemption. All of the characters are redeemed in one way or another, from emptiness to fullness, from death to life. Naomi's situation especially follows the typical trajectory of Old Testament lamentation. Feelings of abandonment and anger shift to joy and hope. The book provides an exquisite example of the Wesleyan concept of practical divinity, that is, practical theology. This theology is practical and pragmatic, not academic, and is necessarily interwoven with human perspective when he advises. It is a good question to ask ourselves in the evening. Where have I gleaned today? What improvements have I made in grace or knowledge? What have I learned or done? Reading the Book of Ruth challenges us to consider how we might replicate its examples of faithful living, to indeed ask ourselves how well our daily labors have contributed to creating an ideal society. Ruth is a short book, 85 verses in 4 chapters. The Book of Ruth acts as a bridge between the two major parts of Israel's covenant story. Genesis to Judges focuses on how Abraham's descendants became a nation and on the covenant God made with Israel. The second part, Samuel to Kings, tells the story of the nation's kings and the covenant God made with David as the head of Israel's royal line. Ruth helps the transition by opening in the days of the judges and ending with the genealogy of David. The book may have been written to defend David's right to be king. David was the great-grandson of a Moabite woman named Ruth. The people of Moab did not help the Israelites when they came out of Egypt. The law didn't permit any descendant of a Moabite to join Israel down to the 10th generation. The purpose of Ruth is to show that genuine faith was present in a woman from a nation whose descendants were normally excluded for those 10 generations. The book also shows how God's purposes are accomplished in the world. God's good laws, allowing the poor to collect grain in the fields, his providence over events, and the personal kindness of people all combine to help the story find a redemptive conclusion. In the book, we will meet Ruth and Orpah, who are both daughters-in-law of Naomi. Naomi's husband was Elimelech, Ruth's Mahlon, Orpah's Chilion. The hero of the story is Boaz. We will learn more about each of these characters, but mostly about Naomi and Ruth. The key person in the book is God, and it shows that God's work is not only in the lives, that God did not work only in the lives of Naomi and Ruth, but he continues to work in our lives today. For the scripture reading for today, we will hear the entire Book of Ruth, presented by Shirley Brosius.
The Book of Ruth. In the days when the judges ruled in Israel, a severe famine came upon the land. So a man from Bethlehem in Judah left his home and went to live in the country of Moab, taking his wife and 2 sons with him. The man's name was Elimelech, and his wife was Naomi. Their 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem in the land of Judah, and when they reached Moab, they settled there. Then Elimelech died, and Naomi was left with her 2 sons. The 2 sons married Moabite women. One married a woman named Orpah, the other a woman named Ruth. But about 10 years later, both Mahlon and Chilion died. This left Naomi alone, without her 2 sons or her husband. Then Naomi heard in Moab that the Lord had blessed his people in Judah by giving them good crops again. So she and her daughters-in-law got ready to leave Moab to return to her homeland. With her 2 daughters-in-law, she set out from the place where she had been living, and they took the road that would lead them back to Judah. But on the way, Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, "Go back to your mother's homes, and may the Lord reward you for your kindness to your husbands and to you. May the Lord bless you with the security of another marriage." Then she kissed them goodbye, and they all broke down and wept. "No," they said, "we want to go with you to your people." But Naomi replied, "Why should you go on with me? Can I still give birth to other sons who could grow up to be your husbands? No, my daughters, return to your parents' homes, for I am too old to marry again. And even if it were possible, and I were to get married tonight and bear sons, then what? Would you wait for them to grow up and refuse to marry someone else? No, of course not, my daughters. Things are far more bitter for me than for you, since the Lord himself has raised his fist against me." Then again they wept together, and Orpah kissed her mother-in-law goodbye. But Ruth clung tightly to Naomi. "Look," Naomi said, "your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. You should do the same." But Ruth replied, "Don't ask me to leave you and turn back. Wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you live, I will live. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. Wherever you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord punish me severely if I allow anything but death to separate us." When Naomi saw that Ruth was determined to go with her, she said nothing more. So the 2 of them continued on their journey. When they came to Bethlehem, the entire town was excited by their arrival. "Is it really Naomi?" the women asked. "Don't call me Naomi," she responded. "Instead, call me Mara, for the Almighty has made life very bitter for me. I went away full, and the Lord has brought me home empty. Why call me Naomi when the Lord has caused me to suffer, and the Almighty has sent such tragedy upon me?" So Naomi returned from Moab, accompanied by her daughter-in-law Ruth. They arrived in Bethlehem in early spring at the beginning of the barley harvest. Now there was a wealthy and influential man in Bethlehem named Boaz, who was a relative of Naomi's husband Elimelech. One day, Ruth said to Naomi, "Let me go out into the harvest fields and pick up stalks of grain behind anyone who is kind enough to let me do it." Naomi replied, "All right, my daughter, go ahead." So Ruth went out to gather grain behind the harvesters. And as it happened, she found herself working in a field that belonged to Boaz. While she was there, Boaz arrived from Bethlehem and greeted his workers. "The Lord bless you," he said. "The Lord be with you," his workers replied. Then Boaz asked his foreman, "Who is that young woman over there? Who does she belong to?" His foreman replied, "She is the young woman from Moab who came back with Naomi. She asked me this morning to gather grain behind the workers. She has been hard at work ever since, except for a few minutes rest in the shelter." Boaz went over and said to Ruth, "Listen, my daughter, stay right here with us to gather grain. Don't go to any other fields. Stay right behind the young women in my field and follow them. See which part of the field they are harvesting and follow them. I have warned my young men not to treat you roughly, and when you are thirsty, help yourself to the water they have drawn from the well." Ruth fell at his feet and thanked him warmly. "What have I done to deserve such favor?" she asked. "I am only a foreigner." "Yes, I know," Boaz replied, "but I also know about everything you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband. I have heard how you left your mother and father and your own land to come here and live among complete strangers. May the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge, reward you fully for what you have done." "I hope I continue to please you," Ruth replied. "You have comforted me by speaking so kindly to me, even though I'm not one of your workers." At mealtime, Boaz called to her, "Come over here and help yourself to some food. You can dip your bread in the sour wine." So Ruth sat with his harvesters, and Boaz gave her some roasted grain to eat. She ate all she wanted and still had some left over. After Ruth went back to work, Boaz ordered his young men, "Let her gather grain right among the sheaves without stopping her, and pull some heads of barley from the bundles and drop them on purpose for her. Let her pick them up and don't give her a hard time." So Ruth gathered barley there all day. When she beat out the grain that evening, it filled an entire basket. She carried it back to town and showed it to her mother-in-law. She also gave her the roasted grain left over from her meal. "Where did you gather all this grain today? Where were you working?" Naomi asked. "May the Lord bless the one who has treated you so kindly." Then Ruth told Naomi all about the man in whose field she had worked. She said, "The man I worked with today was named Boaz." "The Lord bless him," Naomi said. "He is showing his kindness to us as well as to your dead husband. That man is one of our closest relatives, one of our family redeemers." Then Ruth said, "What's more, Boaz told me to come back and stay with his young women through the whole harvest." "Good," Naomi explained. "Do as he says, my daughter. Stay with his young women through the entire harvest. You might be harassed in other fields, but you'll be safe with him." So Ruth worked alongside the women in Boaz's field and gathered grain with them until the barley harvest was completed. Then she continued working with them through the wheat harvest in early summer, and all the while she lived with her mother-in-law. One day, Naomi said to Ruth, "My daughter, it's time I found a permanent home for you so that you may be provided for." Boaz Boaz is a close relative of ours, and he's been very kind by letting you gather grain with his workers. Tonight he'll be winnowing barley at the threshing floor. Now do as I tell you. Take a bath, put on perfume, and dress in your nicest clothes. Then go to the threshing floor, but don't let Boaz see you until he has finished eating and drinking. Be sure to notice where he lies down, then go uncover his feet and lie down there. He will tell you what to do. I will do everything you say, Ruth replied. She went down to the threshing floor that night and followed the instructions of her mother-in-law. After Boaz had finished eating and drinking and was in good spirits, he lay down at the far end of the pile of grain and went to sleep. Then Ruth came quietly, uncovered his feet, and lay down. About midnight, Boaz suddenly woke up and turned over. He was surprised to see a woman lying at his feet. "Who are you?" he asked. "I am your servant Ruth," she replied. "Spread the corner of your covering over me, for you are my family redeemer." "The Lord bless you, my daughter," Boaz exclaimed. "You are showing even more family loyalty now than you did before, for you have not gone after a younger man, whether rich or poor. Now don't worry about a thing, my daughter. I will do what is necessary, for everyone in town knows you are a virtuous woman. But while it is true that I am one of your family redeemers, there is a man who is more closely related to you than I am. Stay here tonight, and in the morning I will talk with him. If he is willing to redeem you, very well, let him marry you. But if he is not willing, then as surely as the Lord lives, I will redeem you myself. Lie here until morning." So Ruth lay at his feet until the morning, although she got up to leave before it was light enough for people to recognize each other, because Boaz had said, "No one must know that a woman was up the threshing floor." Then Boaz said to Ruth, "Bring your cloak and spread it out." And he measured 6 scoops of barley into her cloak and placed it on her back. Then he returned to the town. When Ruth got back to Naomi, her mother-in-law asked, "What happened, my daughter?" Ruth told Naomi everything Boaz had done for her. And she added, "And he gave me these 6 scoops of barley and said, 'Don't return to your mother-in-law empty-handed.'" Then Naomi said to Ruth, "Just be patient, my daughter, until we hear what happens. The man won't rest until he has settled things today." Boaz went down to the town gate and took a seat there. Just then, the other family redeemer he had mentioned came by, so Boaz called to him, "Come over here and sit down, friend. I want to talk to you." So the two of them sat down together. Then Boaz called 10 leaders from the town and asked them to sit as witnesses. And he said to the family redeemer, "You know Naomi, who came back from Moab. She is selling the property that belonged to our relative Elimelech. I thought I should speak to you about this so that you can redeem it if you wish. If you want the land, then buy it here in the presence of these witnesses. But if you don't want the land, let me know right away, because I am next in line to redeem it after you." The man replied, "All right, I'll redeem the land." Then Boaz told him, "Of course, your purchase of the property from Naomi also requires you to marry Ruth, the Moabite widow. That way she can have a child to carry on her husband's name and to keep the land in the family." "Then I can't redeem the land," the man replied, "because it might endanger my own estate. You redeem the land, I cannot do it." In those days, it was the custom in Israel that anyone transferring a right of purchase would remove his sandal and hand it to the other party. This publicly validated the transaction. So the other family redeemer drew off his sandal as he said to Boaz, "You redeem the land." Then Boaz said to the elders and the crowd standing around, You are witnesses that today I purchased from Naomi all of the property belonging to Elimelech, Chilion, and Mahlon, and with the land I have acquired the right to marry Ruth, the Moabite widow of Mahlon. This way she can have a son to carry on the family name of her dead husband and to inherit the family property in his hometown. You are witnesses. The elders and the people standing in the gate replied, we are witnesses. May this woman you are bringing into your home be like Rachel and Leah, from whom all of Israel descended. May you prosper in Betsworth and be famous in Israel. May the Lord give you descendants by this young woman, like the descendants of our ancestor Perez, the son of Tamar in Judah. So Boaz took Ruth into his home, and she became his wife. When he slept with her, the Lord enabled her to become pregnant, and she gave birth to a son. Then the women of the town said to Naomi, praise the Lord who has at last provided a redeemer for your family. May this child be famous in Israel. May he restore your youth and care for you in your old age, for he is the son of a daughter-in-law who loves you and has been better to you than 7 sons. Naomi took the baby and cuddled him to her breast. She cared for him as if he were her own, and the neighbor women said, now at last Naomi has a son again. And they named him Obed. Obed became the father of Jesse and the grandfather of David. This is the genealogical record of their ancestor, Perez. Perez was the father of Hezron. Hezron was the father of Ram. Ram was the father of Amminadab. Amminadab was the father of Nahshon. Nahshon was the father of Salmon. Salmon was the father of Boaz. Boaz was the father of Obed. Obed was the father of Jesse. And Jesse was the father of David. God's word for God's people.
Over the next several weeks, I'm not going to limit myself to 4. It may be 4, it may be 5, it might be 6. I'm not quite sure how long it's going to take us, but over the next weeks, we will be digging deeper into this wonderful book about humanity and God's redemption.